does that mean in terms of how soon you can move to the next phase? And what is the next phase?
Well, the next piece, right now I'm trying to get my bureaucratic ducks in a row is what I'm, kind of thinking of it as, just make sure that all the various regulatory agencies are happy with whatever plan that we've got for their particular area. And so we've got that, all the boxes are checked except for that emergency access box. And so then, when I get that piece done, that means that I'll feel comfortable moving forward with the preliminary plat application. And the preliminary plat application requires detailed plans for all those major pieces of infrastructure: roads, water, sewer, grading, drainage, all that kind of stuff. And that's going to involve a significant amount of money. I don't have a clear idea. I just know it's a whole lot more than it was 20 years ago. So I'm guessing that it might be a cost of, I don't know, $50,000 to $80,000 of engineering fees, legal fees, all that kind of stuff. Soft cost, development soft costs. And before I, commit to spending that money, then I'll be opening up full membership, because I want to make sure that we have enough full committed members to justify spending that kind of money. So get the bureaucratic ducks in a row, open up full membership, which there's a lot of preliminary work to opening up full membership, because I need to work with a lawyer to put together an agreement so that you folks, when you sign up to become full members, can read a legal document, that will spell out your rights. You don't want to just hand me a check for $12,000 and then, I can screw you over, which I won't do, but, that you want to know that you're protected, and what I'm guaranteeing, that you're going to get, and under what conditions, you'd get your $12,000 back, and under what conditions you would not get it back. That's got to be spelled out. This is like real world legal stuff where everybody's got to feel secure and comfortable with what they're getting into. And so then full membership opens, and then preliminary plat application work happens, where the engineers, get to work and do all those detailed plans. That gets submitted to the county. Hopefully, if we've got all those bureaucratic ducks in a row, the approval comes without a whole lot of angst and trouble. And then we get approval, and then we move heavily into, design, and then construction, and then move in, and then party.
So when the ducks are in a row and you are doing this the early phases of that, you will already have decided where the P2 is going to be located. Is that right?
Yeah, because there'll be detailed, drawings of where each lot is going to be, how it's going to be served by water, sewer access, all that. So that'll all.
So all the lot. I mean, the plat involves literally the exact lots, and where they'll be, etc.
All surveyed out, everything.
So is there, do you anticipate a process of collective conversation about, for example, the kind of design of the location of the 14 plots and whatnot?
Well, it's going to be a community decision, a phase 1 community decision, where on the land the phase 2 cluster is going to be. Mm-hmm. But then the actual drawing of the cluster, the design of the cluster, will probably just be, and I haven't worked all these details out. I mean, to a certain extent, we're building this plane after it's already taken off. But I think it's going to be mostly a collaboration between me and Matt Warswick, who's our architect, and you'll meet him on this call this morning, and then the engineers to figure that out. So it's not going to be, there'll be some limited opportunity for input from phase 2 members, but it's going to be pretty limited. I'm just going to be honest about that. The main input on design that the phase 2 members will be involved with will be home design input, and we'll go into that extensively today. That's that's the basis of this call.
So do you already have a pretty developed idea of kind of what sort of layout of the 14 plots would be?
No, we'll have to figure out where they're going to be and then kind of see what the land, is telling us about, grades and configuration and stuff. I mean, we'll try to make it, fit on the land really well, and we'll try to have it, promote community and social interaction really well and maintain privacy really well. I mean, there's be a lot of, factors that we're going to. And now let's segue into the rest of the meeting, because I think we've got a pretty dang full agenda this morning. So welcome everybody. I think this is probably our biggest gathering so far. Let me just check my agenda real quick. So this morning, what we're going to be looking at and working on is, to review the Holmes decision and the Holmes design process. The plan is to, be here from 9 to 10:30, and we can always, stay after a little bit if folks want to. Obviously, if people need to come and go, do whatever you need to do. Take care of yourself. Charlie has got this recorded, and Charlie and I are working on setting up some kind of a YouTube channel or something so we can capture these recordings and have them permanently available. We have been recording them on the Zoom account, but that has a very limited shelf life, and so we lose the recordings. But we want to start saving these, because as we move forward and phase 2 becomes, grows closer to being a reality, these meetings are going to become more and more substantive, and it's going to be important as people join later that they're able to catch up with these pieces. So we're going to try to create a permanent archive of these recordings. Let's see. What I'd like to do is have the new phase 2 associate members introduce themselves, just kind of say, who are the people in your household and where you live, just a quick hello, if that's possible. And I'll just read through the list of the folks that have joined since our last gathering. And if they're not here, then we'll just pass them over. And if they're here, then please jump in and share, again, who's in your household and where you live. So is Shelley here this morning? Shelley O'Neill? I don't think so. Dawn and Tom, you're here. Would you like to introduce yourselves? Just unmute yourself.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hello, I'm Dawn. This is Tom. We live in just north of Houston, Texas right now. And we visited Heartwood about a month ago, and right after the first snow also. And love it there. We've been wanting a co-housing community for quite a long time. And it's just the two of us in our household.
Great.
So we're very excited about meeting everyone and hearing about the plans, and very, willing to do whatever it takes to make it part of our reality.
Good. Well, thanks.
Also, we're extremely excited about it. We got very charged when we came up to see it. It was lovely, and all the people were wonderful. But we've been struggling. I think that financially it's feasible for us to do this, but we've been struggling. There's a lot of fear, I guess. We're in our 60s, which is a great place to be, but we're, just trying to figure everything into our future.
Right.
And so, anyway, that's just I just wanted to say that.
Good. Well, thanks, Tom and Don. Good. David and Kate, are you here? Broyles? Doesn't look like it. Let's see. Janice and Bill, we've got, are they here? Okay. Jennifer and Kelsey, you're here. would you like to introduce yourselves? And you're muted still. There you go.
Yeah, we got it undone. Hi, I'm Jennifer.
I'm Kelsey.
And we are living right now outside of Denver in Lakewood, and had a crazy wind snowstorm that just like blew through for 5 minutes. So we're enjoying that. And we also have a son who's 5. His name's Orion. He's upstairs doing Legos. He came down for a minute, but then he's like gone. So yeah, and we're really excited to be here and learn about the process and kind of get on board and get to know people.
Yeah, we've been looking into community for a long time, intentional or otherwise. And back in, I'm actually originally from Tennessee, tried to help create one there, and that one fell through. So, but just as long as we've known each other, we've been interested in trying to get something on board for intentional community. And we're now in that phase, being in our mid-30s, where we're like, maybe we should find established things and then try and help out and support and be part of that community instead of create our own.
Well, good. Well, welcome. I'm glad you guys are here. And yeah, and I mean, the unfortunate reality is that probably 90% of forming communities don't get formed. And we were one of the lucky ones, and hopefully we'll be lucky again. I think we will. So,
Mac, I believe Janice is here.
well, we got 2 Janices actually, and the Janice that's here, she's old hat now. She's
okay.
But thanks, Sandy.
Jennifer and Kelsey, we just have to tell you that we're really excited about Orion. Our son is 5 years old as well, and he needs some buddies.
And then Charlie, who's an old hand here, but this is his first gathering as a Phase 2 associate member, and he's joined by Brenna. And I'm sorry, but I can't remember if Brenna is a girlfriend or a fiance, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I just did. But introduce yourselves and tell us about it.
Oh, hello everyone. Charlie, for those of you who don't know me, and Brenna here, my girlfriend. And we are excited new signups for being a Phase 2 member. And yeah, I've obviously been on these videos for some time now, but just super excited to be here wearing both hats, and you know, she wearing the excited associate member hat. So just excited about community living in all aspects for sure. I grew up in co-housing and met her, and we're looking at, you know, circling back on that. So we have Chaco, a dachshund who's asleep on my lap right now, so I'm not gonna yeah, he's a little dachshund, little mini dachshund, and we have an orange cat as well named Leon. So
Nice. Thanks, Charlie.
oh, and I should mention, it's soon to be another small dog. We're gonna add another dachshund to our family too. So we're gonna have a third animal in the family.
Yeah. Well, good. And welcome, Brenna. It's really good to have you here.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Good. Good, good. Let's see. Amy and Brock, don't think they're here this morning. And Brooke and Chad, don't think so. Okay. Well, let's jump in. Like I said, we got a lot to cover. Oh, but before we go any further, I'd like Matt to introduce himself just real briefly too. Matt is our architect that we're planning to use for Phase 2, and he's here because we're talking about homes and home design this morning. He lives in a gorgeous co-housing community up in Golden, Harmony Village, that he designed. If you ever get a chance to visit, I'm sure they just love people visiting. Fine. Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Mac and I go way back. I not only designed Harmony Village, but a half dozen other co-housing communities in Colorado, starting with the first one, which is an island outside of Boulder, and have spent many years both working on the design end, but also the entire process that you're getting introduced to, that Mac is shepherding over there, which is finding land, building a group, getting organized, communicating, putting together money. It really is a do-it-yourself development process, and it's challenging. It takes a lot of commitment. It takes people like Mac and Sandy to spearhead the whole effort to succeed. And I think you're in very good hands over there. I really enjoyed previously working with the Heartwood folks, and look forward to getting to know you and jumping in on this project too.
Thank you, Matt. All right, as is our tradition, we'll start the meeting with reading the vision. A volunteer that would like to read that, and I think I can post it to the little chat thing if I am clever enough. There, I think I just posted it. Would somebody be willing to read it this morning? We can sit here all day.
Vision. To create and live in a community that fosters harmony with each other, the larger community, and nature.
Thank you, Scott. All righty, just a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. I think this has happened for most people already. Rename yourself as needed so that there's everybody's name that's on your screen so everybody else can see that, and your full name also if possible, please. And then everybody will stay muted, and then you'll unmute yourself when it's time for a question or a comment. Today we're not going to have open discussion, but we should hopefully have plenty of time for questions. And so when you're going to have a question, there's 3 ways you can get Charlie's attention. Charlie will facilitate the questions, the calling on people, and then once once we've heard the question, then I'll either answer it or Matt will answer it, or maybe somebody else. But you can either raise your hand physically, or you can, I think, click on the 3 dots and it'll say raise hand, some kind of electronic means to do that. Or we're going to try something new this time based on feedback from a previous gathering. People can post questions in the chat, and I will not be reading the chat because I'm not smart enough to read and talk at the same time. But Charlie will be watching the chat, and so again, he'll be fielding questions either from the chat or spoken. So that's basically the preliminary stuff that we have to cover, I think. Any questions about the logistics before we just jump right in? All right. Well, I've put together a little keynote presentation, keynote being the Apple equivalent of PowerPoint. So I'm going to share my screen and jump into that. And then we're going to break it up. I've got 3 sections, and we'll have questions and answers at the end of each of those. So there'll be a little presentation, a little question and answer. So I'm not going to interrupt the any given segment to answer questions, but we'll have hopefully plenty of time for answering questions. All right, share screen. All right, this one. Okay, can everybody see that all right, the title slide? Yeah, looks good. I'm seeing some head nods. All right, so today we're going to talk about phase 2 homes. And the decision, which probably doesn't surprise too many people, is that we are going to sell homes and not lots, which is another way of saying we're going to build 14 production homes and no custom homes. And just as a quick review, there's a lot more to it than this, but I just wanted to kind of refresh. A custom home, this is just kind of definitions. A custom home is where a home buyer buys a lot, hires an architect and a builder, obtains construction financing, and then eventually a mortgage when the construction is completed. The homeowner has full responsibility. So it's buying a piece of dirt with some utilities hooked up, and then you build your own home. That is what we are not going to be doing in phase 2. Production homes, that's where TAR Development, which is the development LLC that I've set up that Sandy and I own, hires an architect and the builder, obtains construction financing, and then the TAR development has full responsibility for making all those pieces happen. And then the homeowner, once the house is completed, obtains a mortgage and buys a completed home. The reasons, the rationale behind the decision. One is the survey results. You know, everybody when they become phase 2 associate members, they're invited to take a survey, which most of you have taken. And here are, you know, the results, which is basically, you know, in that question where I asked, would you prefer a production home or a custom home? 14 of the respondents said production home, 2 said custom home, and 3 said not sure. Another very significant reason, you know, perhaps the most significant, is lower cost. I mean, costs of construction are just going through the roof. And anything we can do to make it possible for people to live here in terms of affordability, you know, we want to do that. I mean, there's obviously a lot to balance between quality, environmental friendliness, cost, and all that, but cost is a significant factor. And let's see. So here's a slide that we looked at back in April, and I want to bring your attention to this box right here, the lower cost. And Heartwood's phase 1 production homes cost us about $75 a square foot to build. The custom homes ranged from maybe $110 a square foot to $200 a square foot. And so maybe, you know, about twice as much really per square foot to build as the production homes. I mean, it varied a lot, but significantly more. I think it's safe to say. And then these blue numbers represent the information I got from interviewing builders back in March in preparation for this April gathering we had. And they were, you know, estimating that production homes would cost about $200 a square foot and custom homes about $225 to $265 a square foot. And of course that can go, you know, way above $265, you know, if you have a marble jacuzzi tub and, you know, whatever, you know, you can build very expensive houses. But, you know, basically it's, you know, it's a significant cost difference. Here was another slide from April, and, you know, let's just look at, you know, a 1,500 square foot home. You know, if it was a custom home, extrapolating on those numbers, you know, the completed home would be about $487,000 to, you know, like $550,000, whereas the production would be estimated at more like $450,000. So again, significant cost difference. I just wanted to visit something from, I don't know if people are familiar with this book, but this is the book that launched Chuck Durrett. They're the architects from the Bay Area that went to Denmark and studied co-housing there, which is where it originated. I mean, really, it originated in our species, you know, tens of thousands of years ago. But in its modern form, you know, they went over to Denmark and brought it back. This book launched in the United States in the late 80s. Just a couple of quotes from that book that get to this idea of production versus custom. So it says, and again, this is directly from the book. Although the idea of sweat equity is appealing, a far more effective way to keep housing prices down is for residents to consciously limit the number of custom features into the design of the houses. As one contractor explains, if the builders have to think about what they're doing, if they have to keep track of what goes where in each house, they charge a lot more. Minor custom touches, such as an extra wall or different bathroom fixtures, although relatively inexpensive when viewed one by one, have a cumulative effect that can increase the cost of construction exponentially for everyone and affect construction timelines. So that's just a, you know, it's a big theme that's a little bit hard to grasp sometimes, that, you know, how can just one little change make such a difference? But the efficiencies of production home, you just don't want, you know, a lot of idiosyncrasies, because that causes significant, delays and extra costs. Okay, so the third reason is it's a lot less work for the home buyer. If you're, you may have heard people talk about, the quickest way to a divorce is try to build a custom home, with your wife, because there's 1,000 decisions that have to be made. And by building production homes, the number of decisions is going to be much more limited for each individual home buyer. For people that are into wanting to make those decisions, there's going to have to be a committee or a team that, makes all those decisions, what kind of doorknobs and what kind of, baseboard and what kind of this and that and wall systems and all that. And so those decisions are have to be made, but each individual home buyer doesn't have to make them for their own home. That slide speaks for itself. And then the fourth reason, the faster construction, and that was alluded to in that quote from the co-housing book, that if everything's the same, boom, 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 you can, build homes on a quicker timeline. And then excellent quality is, and people that have toured the homes here at Heartwood are probably aware that all the homes, custom and production, are really well-designed, well-built homes. And so, excellent quality is definitely possible in the production homes, and environmentally friendly. And I checked in with Mimi. A lot of people know Lynn McGee, who goes by Mimi. She lives in number 7, a gorgeous little Robert Laporte EcoNest straw clay home. And she's a real numbers person. And so she's kept data on her home heating costs. And so I called her and asked her for those data. And then I pulled them together for our house so we could do a, kind of a side-by-side comparison. This really kind of shocked me, frankly. So here's Mimi's house, this picture in the lower left corner. And again, it's that beautiful straw clay house. And here's our house, mine and Sandy's house. And we have a production home. It's a Model D. So for 2019, Mimi's straw clay house, she told me, is $554 in natural gas bills. And for our homes here, natural gas does the heating, it heats the water, and people use it for cooking, so it's doing all those things. So the cost per month is about $46, and that's obviously, a very low number. If you looked at, heating costs across the country in climate similar to ours, $46 per month on average is very low. And so by comparison though, and this is kind of what blew me away, I looked up our numbers for our house. Our house is a 2,600 square foot house. It's about 800 and some square feet per floor for a first floor, second floor, and basement. And our total cost for the year was actually less than Mimi's, $519 for heating a house that's 2.5 times the size, more than 2.5 times the size. And again, our average cost is $43 a month. There's some things that go on here. I mean, her house is basically a 1-story house with a loft, whereas ours is 3-story. And, you get a lot of efficiency, if you're looking at the, the number of square feet that you're heating, and you compare that to the, the outside of the house, we have a lot more square feet with less, less external walls. And of course, the most important external surface is the roof, because that, heat rises. And so that's where, a house is going to lose a lot of its heat. And so we've got a roof, that covers 3 floors, where she's got a roof that covers, 1 plus a loft. And so there's going to be a lot of efficiency gain there. Bottom line in all this is that you can be very energy efficient with a production built house if, you design that home to be energy efficient, and the wall systems, the roof system, all that kind of stuff. And then I just threw in here, the last column here is the cost of air conditioning, because there was something in Marta's survey about air conditioners. And just to point out that, the houses here at Heartwood don't have air conditioners. We don't need them. We have a lovely climate. And if it gets up to, in the 90s in the summer some days, but with a very well insulated house with enough mass, we can live very comfortably without an air conditioner. And, obviously there's a couple of significant benefits to that: lower cost, more environmentally friendly. But another piece that I absolutely love is that by being able to throw open the windows in the summer, we're letting nature in, we're letting in fresh air, we're hearing bird song. I mean, I just love living without an air conditioner. Okay, so that's it on kind of the decision that was made to go with production homes and the reasons behind it. And let's see if there's any questions. I'll stop sharing my screen now. And Charlie, you can call on people if there are any questions. And then when we're done with that, we'll move on to the next section.
Great. And the way I'll do this is, there were some questions posted, but I'll give you guys the option to ask it yourselves. So first up, I had Mary Ellen and Paul. Do you want to ask your question, or I can read it for you?
Read it.
Oh, you said I can. Okay. So can builders accommodate some sweat equity work by the phase 2 buyers?
Yeah, and the answer is yes. We would have to come after the builder is done with their work. So like in our house, we received the house with an unfinished basement. We received the house with a very minimal back patio. So, we built a nice back patio. We finished our basement. Other people installed their own flooring, that kind of thing. But the sweat equity comes after the builder has left and that you own the house. That's when you would do your sweat equity.
Great. So from Sue and Steve. Do you guys want to ask?
I guess we were curious because we would like to use as least amount of energy as possible, and we were wondering if there'd ever been any consideration given to making them net zero energy homes, moving in that direction. I know Heartwood already tries to conserve energy, but so many people are moving in the direction of, we would like to use all electricity and try to generate through solar panels. And I wondered if the community had ever considered trying to make this phase a net zero addition to the community.
Yeah, I mean, it really wasn't a concept back 20 years ago, but now so we didn't really consider it for phase 1 particularly, but for phase 2, it could certainly be on the table. Anything, is possible, and, we can look at it. And it'll just be a matter, again, of balancing the various needs of, affordability, both in the short term and the long term, which net zero speaks to, initial investment for long-term savings, and environmental responsibility. So it would be a possibility.
Great. So Marta and Rob, it looks like there was a question about AC. She said that I've added a question about AC because someone listed it as their want. Most questions were based on the feedback that she had received from members. Do you want to add anything to that, Marta?
Yeah, just one comment. Probably, as I was thinking about that, it's probably based on the climate where we're living right now, more than, in the houses that we are used to. So I think, so just wanted to clarify that all the things that I included in the survey were the things that people mentioned in their emails to see, you know, how many other people are have strong feelings about the same features. And again, like Max said, this is all just super preliminary, just to kind of give us the idea of where others, what others are thinking in general terms. And yeah, that's all.
I have a quick question regarding AC. So with climate change, I mean, the temperatures are going to be getting hotter, including in Colorado. So I guess I'm torn between that and then the noise of AC. So for now, we're deciding no AC. Is that correct?
No, nothing's been decided for sure in that regard. I'm just saying that it, you know, it hasn't been necessary in the past. Our houses don't have it. You know, but what we do with phase 2 houses, you know, based on meeting people's needs, you know, we'll go through that design process, and it's on the table. I mean, there's very little that would be ruled out at this point.
And Mac, if I could jump in, most of the Colorado co-housing communities in terms of cooling strategies use evaporative cooling, which works in our dry climate. With the temperature of the country, if you use a lot of humidity, without cooling doesn't work. It works very well here, has much lower electrical use, has a lot of comfort benefits, things like that. So that's the typical cooling strategy, although AC is sometimes used as a backup in specific cases.
Matt, what kind of cooling is it? I didn't hear what you said.
It's called evaporative cooling. People would call it a swamp cooler.
Oh, yes. Okay. So those are pretty noisy, though, right? There's an outside unit, or not necessarily?
There's an outside unit, and it blows air that's been wetted down into the house.
Okay.
So they're not, yeah, I wouldn't, to me, it's background noise, but yes, they do make some noise. Depends on where they're located. And they come into the house, and then when you open the windows, the air flows down and through and out the windows, so you can control the airflow internally.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for jumping in, Matt.
Sure.
Okay, and I think that just while we were on that topic, there was that swamp cooler question from Janice, so I'm going to assume that was answered. Next is from Becky, and then Dawn and Tom, you guys have your hands raised. I'll do you guys next. But Becky.
And then let me just interrupt. Let's just take those 2 questions and then move on to the next section, okay?
Perfect. Okay, Becky, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? Oh, she's on the phone, so I'm going to ask, how would a pod house fit into the production home designs?
Well, if there's enough interest, I mean, we'll get into that a little bit, but you know, we'll have a finite number of models available. But if there's enough interest in a pod house, and it's the only way that people are going to be able to afford to live there, and it's you know, it's either a strong need or a strong want. You know, it could be a possibility that maybe, you know, we have a pod house as part of the production home choices, and maybe we just build one of them. I mean, we'll have to, you know, figure that out, but it could be possible, I think. Would you see that as a problem with that at all, Matt? Do you understand what we mean by pod house?
Well, I know you and I talked a little bit about that terminology. I've seen other variations of that in other communities, although in those cases, there wasn't not enough. It was like a household or 2 at most that wanted it, so it wasn't enough to meet the threshold for production design. So it really does depend. Things are changing a lot in terms of demographics and needs and costs. So yeah, I think if it fits within the criteria of enough people wanting it, then definitely. And of course, there's some issues around the ownership structure and things like that that need to be sorted out that are a little unusual. But my criteria is if there's enough people in the community that want that kind of thing, we should be working hard to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Don and Tom.
I have a comment about that. population. It seems like a pod house would be a reasonable consideration just as a value for the total Heartwood community to have, people that wouldn't be able to buy a $300,000 house or something like that. Just a thought.
That's
I absolutely agree. And we've seen that in other communities I've designed. Like Colorado Springs, we made a, fourplex in one building to fit it, into the neighborhood design and everything, but it was specifically for the issues you just mentioned, Tom.
Yeah, and that's one of our unique challenges here is that we have a value around income diversity. And so and you'll see this later in the presentation, is that we're trying to figure out how to get people into homes they can afford, to meet that kind of minimal or that lower group of people, with less financial resources. And at the same time, for people that have greater, financial resources and maybe different wants and needs, to create the flexibility so they can have that too. And so I think, I think we were pretty successful in that in phase one, but it is a unique challenge to our neighborhood. I mean, a typical developer would just say, I'm going for a certain income group, and that's what all the houses are. Whereas we're trying to, meet the needs of a broader, income diversity.
Yeah,
you can also, quick comment on that. You could also run into some of the bureaucratic things Max already mentioned when it comes to zoning, et cetera. And we're going to put together a custom type one, I believe, a planned unit development. But you probably know a lot of neighborhoods are set up for either single family homes or maybe duplexes. So when you start going into more units within, let's say it's a fourplex, then you're dealing with different zoning criteria than you are in a conventional subdivision. So once again, it can, with all the best intentions, it can sometimes create additional complications as well that we have to sort through.
Yeah, and it seems like in phase one, there were a number of apartments built into the homes that then, you can rent out. So.
Yep. Yeah, and that's been a great.
In my experience, that's the most typical arrangement in co-housing, is that people figure out a way to rent out a room. In our community, we require owner occupants. Everybody who owns a house needs to be here. You can't use it as an income property, but we do allow people to rent out rooms, and I'd say probably a quarter to a third of the people do that. So you do end up with a whole group of folks in the community that are, that can be there and experience community. And I know Mac has that in Heartwood with lower incomes.
Awesome.
I have a question about on the line of the rental income. Are people considering little casitas as possibly for guests or to rent as part of their lot in the building?
Do you mean a separate building or a unit within the main building?
Well, it could be separate or it could be attached, but something that would be have its own separate kitchen, bedroom, and bathroom.
Yeah.
So guests to come in or a rental.
Our Model E here, the people in that model subgroup, and I'll talk about those coming up here soon, they specifically wanted that. And so our Model E homes here have a separate entrance, separate kitchen. That's what Becky lives in. She lives in one of those casitas. We don't call it a casita, but I know what you mean here in the Model E.
Okay. I have a question about the condition of the humidity inside the homes. I know for Colorado is very dry. Is there a way to accommodate more humidity in the homes, like a humidifier built in?
Yes. Short answer, just because I know Max wants to keep things moving along. The answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Okay,
right,
go for it, Mac.
We good? Sorry, Charlie, I didn't hear that. We good to go?
Yeah, you're good to go. And if you guys have questions, just in the name of time, feel free to post it to the chat. I'll save the chat and we can answer anything after. Matt can, or Matt. So.
Okay. Fabulous. So share screen again. Second segment of the presentation. All right, let's see. What am I doing? All right. Can everybody see home design process? Yep, good. All right, so obviously now we're going to talk about the process of how the homes are going to get designed. So every phase 2 member will belong to one model subgroup based on size, budget, etc. And you'll notice it doesn't say phase 2 associate member. This will be happening after, you know, we have full membership open. And, you know, people will kind of sort themselves out into, you know, like I've got a small budget, I want a small house, or I got a medium budget, I want a medium house, you know, that kind of thing. If you've been paying close attention, you might realize that Heartwood has a Model A, a Model C, a Model D, and a Model E. It's like, well, what happened to Model B? And that's in that sorting out process. We started with a Model B, but then I can't remember the exact details, but it probably went something like this, where there weren't maybe enough people in that model subgroup, or they realized that, oh, you know, we're pretty close in our needs to what the Model A people want, or the Model C people want, and then those two groups, those subgroups got combined. And so that Model B ended up getting eliminated early in the process. So the members kind of end up getting sorted into, you know, some category, mostly based on size and budget, but etc. I mean, it could be based on 1-story versus 2-story, you know, for roughly the same square footage and the, you know, same number of bedrooms and baths. I mean, there's different ways, or it could be a pod house. You know, there's different ways that those could be sorted out, but basically everybody will sort themselves out into some model subgroup that fits their needs best. Each model subgroup will collaborate with Matt and our builder. And here's a little diagram of what that sort of looks like. And so this is the design collaboration. So Matt will be working with these different model subgroups. So maybe subgroup A is, you know, small house, small budget, 2 stories. Maybe model B is small house, medium budget, 1 story. Maybe model C is, you know, medium house, 2-story, medium budget. And it could be that we have 2 model subgroups, could be we have 4 model subgroups. This is just kind of, you know, very rough schematic. And then each of those model subgroups will collaborate with Matt on coming up with their basic home layout. So that collaboration's going on. And then, so Matt will create a basic sketch of what that house might be that the model subgroup is happy with. And then he'll then collaborate with the builder in terms of getting an estimate for that. And then they'll come back to the model subgroup and say, oh, guess what? You know, your budget was, you know, $300,000, but this, what we came up with to meet all your wants and needs was, you know, $380,000. So now we have to start, you know, that model subgroup will have to work with Matt to start whittling down, all right, which wants and needs are we not going to be able to meet possibly, and then go back to the builder with, you know, draft 2 and get new cost estimates. And so it's an iterative process of Matt working with the model subgroups, and then working with the builder to get cost estimates and figuring out how to meet, you know, all the wants and needs as best as possible, you know, making compromises along the way, obviously, to fit those all in. And one of the big needs, obviously, is the budget, the affordability part. You know, how I fit into all this, I'm not sure exactly, you know, and, you know, whether I'll have some role in helping with facilitate some of these meetings or not, but, you know, I'll work with Matt on that to figure out, you know, how he wants to do it. But I think it looks something like that. Matt, do you have anything to comment on with regard to this?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges in a group design process we've seen over and over again in co-housing, somewhat analogous to the efficiencies of production housing, is we want to try to streamline and organize our communications to make them as efficient as possible. So, we will have ways to develop a fairly detailed program with input. That's the first step, the listing of all the wants and needs. That's what we call the program. The second phase, which we call schematics or concept designs, that Mac was talking about. There's a process for developing those and getting feedback. Mac, I think I would want, in terms of coordination with the builder, you in the kind of developer role are going to probably maintain your position directly with the builder. So you and I would work, I would get the specifics from the subgroup and then say, okay, can you, Mac, get some new estimates? I would certainly like to communicate with the builder, but in terms of my role, don't want to be tracking down all kinds of cost estimates on an ongoing basis day to day. I think you and I can collaborate on that more effectively. Yep. So a lot of this is establishing the good communication structure so that we're as efficient as possible at getting things done. That's the essence of it.
Yep. Thanks, Matt. Perfect. All right. And then the next thing I just wanted to point out is that we've got a little bit of a secret weapon here. And that is this guy, Kelly Matthews. And Kelly is a good friend of ours. He actually was just on the Grand trip. He's been a custom home builder in the area for, geez, I don't know, 20 years or more. And he and his wife, Jen, just built a gorgeous little custom home. And he's very much about what Heartwood is about. And that is, he's built straw clay, he's built straw bale, and the most recent house he built was neither of those, because he's kind of said, those wall systems are fine and nice, but they're not the most important part of the house, and they end up adding a lot of cost. And so he's researched all the and he just built this house just this summer. So he's researched all the latest and greatest green technologies for building environmentally responsible homes, both in terms of the, how does that product show up at the building site? What was the environmental damage that happened to get it there, and trying to minimize that? And then how does that material impact the overall, environmental impact of the home, for the duration? And so he's a wealth of, information about that. He knows the local suppliers, and he's, done research all over the continent too, in terms of, he bought his wall system materials from somebody in Calgary, I think it was, somewhere in Canada, and had them, shipped down. And so he's going to be somehow part of the team. I'll hire him to help, consult to try to figure out how do we accomplish some of those environmental and, budget needs to get really, state-of-the-art, environmentally friendly houses. And I was going to include in this whole slide, show some pictures of his house and have him on the call possibly, but I realized we just got so much on the other good friends of ours this weekend, and I didn't want to make them stay home, to give them like 2 minutes of time. So anyway, but Kelly Matthews is going to be, I think, a real asset in this whole process. All right. So the purposes of the model subgroups, there's two purposes. One is to determine the budget, the square footage, both finished and unfinished, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, how many stories, and just the basic arrangement of the house. So kind of that, the important foundational building blocks of the home, in collaboration with Matt. And then, Matt will be the one that does the design work, the detailed design work. And then the model subgroup will, review and approve the conceptual floor plans. just, kind of the rough floor plan. I mean, what I think of it as, and Matt, you're going to have an opportunity to correct me, is kind of the back of the envelope kind of sketch of what it looks like. And then once the model subgroup approves that, then Matt goes off and does the, the fine detail work. And the model subgroup's not going to approve, every little, detail as it goes. That would just be onerous. But they get happy with the conceptual plan, and then Matt runs with it.
Yeah, that's correct, Mac. I think it works well to have the core program of what people need to get the basic layout that everybody's comfortable with. And that's what everybody gets to approve. Everybody gets to have input in. And then after that, I am certainly open to ideas. So it's not like the door gets slammed in your face, but in terms of making decisions of which ideas fit best, that would be up to me.
Good. Thank you. And there we're at the end of that session. So we'll stop the sharing screen and go back to Zoom, regularly scheduled programming, and Charlie fielding questions.
Great. Doug and Jill, I see you have a question. It might have been tagged along with the last segment, but it still could tie in here. Do you guys want to ask that now?
Sure. So I'm sorry if I'm interrupting the program, but we had a follow-up on the mother-in-law quarters, or the casita question. And the question is, will a separate dwelling, casita, be allowed?
So I've got, a partial answer to that. I'm not sure what the regulations, would allow. And even if the regulations do allow a little separate casita, the complexity of that, having Matt design a whole separate little house, seems challenging in my mind. Matt, what's your thinking of building a house with a guest house?
Well, it's a good question. I don't know in terms of our lot sizes and access and that kind of stuff, and/or local zoning. I do know that in the terminology that's often used is an auxiliary dwelling unit, or ADU. Those are becoming much more popular and, of course, appropriate. The regulations around them vary by municipality. So we'd have to look into, what they are locally and whether that works. I'm working on a project right now, actually in Carbondale, where an ADU was required for a particular lot. And it's built into the building. It just has its own as a standard unit with garage. So I think it's certainly appropriate. We need to get up to speed, both in terms of what all the regulations are about that, and then also, once again, see how many people would want, that kind of thing. And, one of the other pieces, of course, to keep in mind is how, for various types of rentals, how does that affect the overall number of people in the community and the flavor of things?
Yeah. And one thing that would also come to mind on that is, I would have to imagine, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, that building a casita into the main house would be far cheaper than building the main house and a separate guest house.
Absolutely. Yes, that definitely makes sense. You're adding cost because you're putting a whole nother kitchen and additional bathroom and things like that in, but you're right. If you incorporate it into the building, then that's going to be definitely more cost effective than a separate structure.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Next, I saw Becky physically wave her hand. Did you have a question?
I think you need to unmute too, Becky. Oh, there you are.
I had a number of questions. Unfortunately, my sister called me in the middle, and I'm going to call her back, but I missed some of this. Did we talk about pod houses? Is a pod house being one of the alternatives?
Yeah, we answered that, and you'll be able to see that in the recording if you want.
Okay. And then what about my question about a neighborhood solar array?
I don't know if that got addressed, so let me jump in on that one. That plus the earlier question about net zero. It's one of the somewhat unique opportunities in community, but it's also still a big challenge that you can potentially do things cooperatively on a scale that you cannot do individually. So of course, on individual houses, we can design them so that you can have your own solar panels. But one of the challenges to go net zero, to go all electric, to get away from gas for heating and things, is you need a way to produce a lot of electricity. And an example of linking that would be to do a large-scale community array, your own solar garden for the community, and then to use something like a ground source heat pumps, which are, you know, a fairly efficient way to use electricity for heating space and hot water. That's not the typical way things are done in Colorado or have been, but you can potentially link that kind of thing. The point that Mac brought up is the cost of all that solar and the cost of all the trenches or wells and all the infrastructure to put in a large-scale community ground source heat pump system is going to be substantial. So long-term, you could look at the numbers and say, environmentally and in terms of savings over 30 years, this may be a good move, but it's going to add a big chunk of money to the front end. So that's one of the challenges to sometimes balance environmental or energy type needs with affordability.
Great. Todd, you want to ask your question now?
Sure. When talking about the design process and going back and forth with the architects, my question is, what's the process for determining those cost estimates prior to that design process taking place, and when we're opening full membership, and kind of how firm are some of those estimates going into that?
That's a great question, and it's always a bugger for anybody in the business when costs move around. So that's the part when I was mentioning working collaboratively. He would be building with the builder, he would have with builders. You know, right now he's gotten some feedback in terms of cost per square foot, or he did last March. They're probably different now, to be honest. So usually it comes down to starting with initial cost per square foot, but then also as you get the configuration. So as Mac mentioned earlier, if we end up with a 2-story configuration with the basement, we know that's the most cost-effective way to configure a building, as opposed to a single-story slab on grade or radiant floor kind of arrangement, like he had comparing to Mimi's house, which is much more expensive. So we would start with rough ballparks, and then as we develop the configurations and could see the shapes of the buildings, we would go back to the builder and say, okay, based on this, is it a simple roof? What's the configuration? That kind of thing. We would hopefully be able to fine tune and get a better feel. We would also, I think, potentially in parallel with the development of the floor plans, be working on our specifications. What are our wall systems, our roof systems? What kind of windows, those kinds of things. If we develop a list of the materials, and Mac mentioned input from Kelly and others, we can be looking at that. So an example would be, okay, we know the shape now, but what are the components? So if we use, you know, all clad wood windows, if we use some amazing green wall panel we got to ship in from Calgary, as opposed to standard framing that we can, you know, pull off the shelf from Home Depot in Durango, you know, what's the difference there? So I think we can start pulling some of those numbers together, exactly when they fit in and in terms of the decision making. I'm not sure, Todd, whether you're asking like knowing numbers before you jump in terms of the financial commitment. Is that the main issue for you?
Yeah, and I don't know if Mac can speak to that because it sounded like we would have some kind of estimate going into that, but obviously we won't have floor plans and a lot of that back and forth yet. So I didn't quite understand where we'll be at when full membership opens.
Right. Yeah. So I can address that a little bit. So when full membership opens, we'll have the most current cost estimates for local construction, fairly standard local construction. And then as we move through the design process, we're going to probably deviate some from standard construction based on the choices we make and whatnot. If we decide to, do a net zero, that's obviously going to push the costs up if we, some of those are going to be internally driven, the decisions that we make, and some of them are going to be externally driven. The prices, construction prices, my understanding right now, are very volatile. The world is very volatile right now with all this COVID stuff. And so, we're not going to be able to predict with any certainty what the eventual home costs are going to be, but what the agreement that we'll enter into will be something like, here's the best estimates that we have right now. And the price of your home is going to be based on the cost that, of what it costs to build it when we really build it. And that as a phase 2 member, you would be obligated to buy that house. So there's definitely some risk in moving from the cost estimates from when I open full membership to when it's time to buy the house. And if it moves, if those costs move up significantly, it could be very problematic, for some members. I get that. And there's just really no way for us to eliminate all that risk. And so as best as possible, how much should, I absorb as developer and how much should the homeowners absorb, the members absorb. And so the best answer I can give is that the people that are the most risk averse, maybe don't sign up right away to become full members and wait until more is known later, more of those details are known. But that creates additional risk for you, because you're not going to get the equity credit reward. I'm rewarding people who join early and are signing up at a time of greater risk by giving them those equity credits. And B, the whole thing could sell out, with people that are willing to jump on when it's first open. And then if you're somebody that wants to wait until, there's a lot less uncertainty, a lot less risk, then maybe there's no more spots available. So, it's a risky, proposition. It's a dance of, developing this project. And, but that's kind of the way I'm looking at it right now in terms of trying to balance that risk and make it work for all of us.
Great. Mac, we're at 10:07 Heartwood local time. How do you feel about 2 more quick questions, or what's your feeling about time?
Well, time is overrated, and but that's an aside. Yeah, we're running a little behind schedule, but as with all of these, we've got some really good questions being asked. I want to give people an opportunity to have their questions answered. So my sense is let's just keep answering. Let's answer those 2 more questions for this session, and then we can follow up or finish up with the very last segment of the presentation. And I'll stick around and answer questions as long as people have them. I'm not sure what Matt's constraints are, everybody else's. Obviously people need to take care of themselves. If they got commitments, they can leave. But let's do 2 more questions for now, and then we'll do the last session, and then we'll just keep taking questions until there are no more.
Okay. Question from Mary Ellen and Paul, or sorry, Sasha and David. towards Matt. Do you have any idea how much an unfinished basement costs per square foot?
And I guess I'm a little confused. Like if we decide we want a 1-story with a basement, does that make it a 2-story house, or is it still just a 1-story with a basement? I'm a little confused. And then I'd like to know what the difference of price would be if we had a 1,500 square foot 1-story with a 1,500 or so basement. Do you know, Matt?
Not off the top of my head, no. I mean, I wouldn't want to jump in and start throwing out numbers at this point. I mean, the essence is, yes, it's a 1-story house with a basement. The essence is that basements, of course, are relatively inexpensive space. In Colorado, you have to put a foundation down below frost level, which is 3 to 4 feet anyway. So going another 4 feet or whatever is a cost-effective way to create space. So typically, it's going to be, I'd say, a third, just as a ballpark, of what regular main floor finished space type costs are, maybe even less. But we'd need to talk locally or talk with the builders about it. The other thing, you know, that can be a variation, and I believe it happened on phase 1, is the type of soil conditions and things can impact the costs of foundation systems. So there's some expansive clay and issues in Heartwood that added to the cost of phase 1, where they had to over excavate, bring in additional rock, compacted like that are just, I think, built in. We don't know if it's going to be the same soils in the phase 2 location, but we could guess that foundations and basements may be a bit more expensive because of local soil conditions.
Okay, and then real quick, Mac, can we assume the 14 homes will all have basements or no?
No, I mean,
Okay.
it's all up. Yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see what people want and price them out and make those decisions, you know.
Okay, thanks, Mac. Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome.
Great. And then last question was for me, and that is a design process related question, kind of for Matt. But I know in my business of civil engineering and consulting, a lot of clients these days love renderings. Sometimes even review agencies love renderings. And I wonder about how that plays into that kind of threshold time marker that Mac had mentioned about, you know, the time when folks kind of select that floor plan. Do renderings play into that early on, or do they come at all for you? And I wonder what the appetite is for associate members as well, for kind of being able to see it in real space.
That's a very good question, and I've struggled with that in my business in terms of the balance between affordability, keeping time down, and making lots of pretty pictures so people can visualize and walk through. Where I typically come down is I work in CAD software that has modeling capabilities, so that I'm always checking it in 3 dimensions. And so I can pull up and show, as we're developing the models, what it looks like from the outside, from different angles, what it would look like from the street. But for those of you that don't know, when you say rendering, we're talking about more specifics usually, and that is showing all the finished materials on the house, and, you know, somebody sitting on the porch petting their dog, that kind of thing, that makes it look real. I don't personally go to that level of work usually, and I've had other clients that if it's a matter of marketing or whatever, when you're finally done and you want the really pretty picture, then you can do that. But my goal is to show enough in 3 dimensions for the many people, and my experience is probably more than half the population cannot visualize very well when they're looking at a 2D floor plan. Some people can, many people cannot. So we try to go through exercises. I can do 2D modeling of looking into a building with furniture in it, and also tell you the dimensions and say, in your own home, get a tape measure out. This room is 12 by 15. Measure that out, look at it, physically understand it, so that there's various ways to try to get the design process into everybody's head so they understand and can give good feedback about. So we try to do that. We're going to have some challenges with the long distance piece here, but I hope that answers your question. I do both the 2D plans and 3D modeling, but not full-blown rendering with all the finishes. Does that answer it for you?
Yep, that's great.
Great, thanks.
All righty. So I think that takes us, if I'm not mistaken, Charlie, to the next segment of presentation.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, let's do it. All right. So this next part is about limited design choices. And this again gets back to that quote from the co-housing book about how to, create construction efficiencies. And one, main for 14 homes, we'll have, 2, 3, 4 models, something like that. The second way is limited number of options and upgrades. And basically, in a house, there's what comes standard. We say, all right, here's the budget, and for that budget, we're going to have these standard features available. An option is to add something in, that wasn't going to be there initially. So like an option in our house was you get a plain, well, all the houses, you have a plain sheetrock ceiling in the living room. If you want, the knotty pine and the beams, that was an option, and you could add that to your house. Like our house, it was a few $1,000s to add that. An upgrade would be like if something comes standard, but then you're going to replace it with something better. So the countertop with a Formica edge was standard, and then the upgrade was you could get a maple strip along the edge. So that's an example of an upgrade. And again, it gets back to this thing of, of too many choices. And so we want to have, buying a home here is going to be eventually like ordering off a menu. I'm going to pick which model I want. I'm going to have a dozen or 2 dozen opportunities for options and upgrades, and I'm going to check them off what I want, and that's going to be the home that's going to be delivered to me. When Sandy and I bought our home, I think it was, I don't know what it was, $185,000, and we ended up adding, we went a little bit crazy on options and upgrades. We ended up adding another $20,000 worth of options and upgrades, I think, onto our house. There's going to be, like I think I alluded to it earlier, a team or a committee that's going to have to make all those, 1,000 decisions about what is going to be the standard hand railing in the house, the standard towel bar in the house, the standard shower unit, and then also what are the options that are going to be available, what are the upgrades that are going to be available. And so that's, that team provided just invaluable work, during phase 1, and that team will exist again during phase 2 to figure all that kind of stuff out. And then one of the main tools that team worked with is what we called the private homes design priorities. And this was, this is kind of a listing of wants and needs that, people wanted in the homes, the community members. But then we said, okay, community members, and this was at a private homes design workshop we did, let's now prioritize those so that when the spec review team is making decisions about windows, for example, they'll have some criteria to base it on. So, we decided that the top priorities, this group 1, were, quality construction, low maintenance, energy efficiency, passive solar, sustainable design and materials, and affordability. So those were the main priorities. But then we also wanted, these other things mentioned in groups 2 and group 3 and group 4. But like, for example, for the window decision, Matt mentioned those, wood clad windows. Those are probably the prettiest windows. and the most expensive windows, and not necessarily the most energy efficient. We ended up with vinyl windows here, which are very energy efficient, very low maintenance, and more affordable than the wood clad windows. So that's just an example how the spec review team will take these overall priorities established by everybody and then apply those to the specific decisions. Phase one, you know, in this category, it was you could have the expanded window wells, you could have a different basement pump system, you could have a different, better, you know, hot water heater. I mentioned the panel, you know, the pine paneling on the ceiling with the timbers, you know, that kind of thing. You know, doors and windows, we had various, you know, options and upgrades related to doors and windows. And this looks like a lot of different choices, but like, you know, for skylights, it's really just one choice. You want a skylight or not? You know, front exterior door, do you want this design or that design? Interior doors, you want the, you know, the vanilla white ones, or do you want to get the knotty pine ones on either one or both floors? You know, so it's not a whole lot of choices, but some choices. You know, we want to keep that in a sweet spot of number of choices, so it's not overwhelming, it's not too expensive, but we want to give people, you know, the opportunity to feel like they're getting the house they want. And this is all electrical, this kind of stuff, add additional outlets, telephone jacks. Anybody remember what those are? Anyway, you know, that kind of thing. I don't even know if we'll have landlines in phase two. Something we'll have to figure out. This is just a, you know, a picture of our, you know, knotty pine ceiling in our living room. This is that expanded window well, and you know, Becky can attest to this, that, you know, these were just brilliant. You know, that Matt introduced us to these, I believe, where instead of the standard little window well, you know, with a smaller window and that, you know, that little kind of metal tunnel that people are used to with the emergency escape ladder, you know, this opens it up in a huge way that brings a tremendous amount of light. You know, one of our big priorities in those basements was to make them really high quality living space. So we put drain board in to keep them real dry in there. We had full 8-foot ceilings, and then these window wells as an option. I mean, these went for about $1,000 a piece. So, you know, they're not cheap necessarily, but they bring in so much more light into the basement and make the space so much more, you know, livable. Just an example of a upgrade. And then no customization. I mean, that's just a huge deal, that somebody would say, well, how much could it cost if I just want that room a little bit bigger, and I just want to add a closet there. And the reality is that communities that allowed that kind of thing to happen just got crushed in terms of additional costs, additional, you know, delays in construction. Because anytime the builder has to stop and think and do something differently, it's going to take more time, or more, you know, or very likely they're just going to miss it, and they're going to build the wrong thing in the house, and then it's going to be caught, you know, later and have to be torn out and rebuilt. So we just don't allow that. I mean, it's actually cheaper if somebody wants the house, you know, the wall moved, to say, nope, we're not going to move it for you. After you own the house, you can tear out that wall and move it, and that'll be cheaper for the whole project than doing it ahead of time. It's kind of a little bit counterintuitive, but it's just something that, you know, a lot of communities learned it the hard way, and we don't want to do that. Creating design flexibility despite limited choices. So we've just said, you know, we're going to, you know, limit the choices in order to be efficient, both in terms of time and money, but we still want incredibly beautiful, high quality, environmentally responsible houses. And that's very possible to do. And it's very easy for me to sit here and say that, because we just, you know, we did it 20 years ago in phase one. So here's some of the ways that we do that. You know, again, one is the options and upgrades, that people can, you know, customize their home to the extent that they can choose different options and upgrades. What we did here with flooring allowance, what that is basically, you know, we need, so to meet the budget, and so to do that, we say, okay, we're going to have, fairly vanilla flooring, I can't remember what it was exactly, but something like linoleum, in the kitchens and dining rooms, and then carpeting in the bedrooms and the hallways and such. But we entered into an agreement with a local, I don't know what type of business it's called, but it's called Quality House, and they sell flooring and they sell all those kind of home finish things. And so each phase one home buyer went into the Quality House showroom and worked with, one of their people. And they said, you can pick from these different linoleums, and these are all within your budget. It won't raise the price of your house at all. You pick the colors you want and the style you want, or you can buy hardwood floors and tile floors and things like that, and you pay more money. And that's, and that works all right in terms of staying efficient with the overall construction process, because the general contractor is just working with that one subcontractor, in this case, Quality House, and timing, when they're coming in, when they're doing their work, and we can maintain the efficiencies and still allow a lot of, design flexibility for the home buyer. That can also be done with lighting. Matt mentioned to me this week when we talked that that's something that he's done in other places. We did not do that in phase one, but it's, again, that's a possibility. These fixtures come standard. If you want to buy the, crystal chandelier, you can do that. You can just pay more money. We did all off-white paint throughout all the houses. That kept things very cheap, but it allows, for complete design flexibility. I mean, you can change a room so much by adding a coat of paint, for so little money. And I think every house now, every production home now, kind of looks like an Easter basket. Ours does, with, all different color walls all over the place. I mean, very colorful. And you'll see that. I've got some pictures coming up of, different Model D homes, just to show you how much variation you can get, even though it's a standard model. Window coverings, the home didn't come with any window coverings, so everybody could, hire somebody to come in and put in drapes, blinds, that kind of thing. Again, customizing, but after they own the home, after the professional builders have moved out. We just don't want to interfere with the efficiency of the professional builders. Unfinished basements, we've talked a lot about that, but that's a way to, get people into a home fairly cheaply. And then people that don't need to finish their basements, like Gail's on this call, she's never finished her basement, and that's, and that works for her. A lot of people said, I want that extra space. I want an extra bedroom. I want an extra office, whatever it might be. And they've gone ahead and finished their basement. It's a way to create that kind of flexibility. Again, from the co-housing book, residents may be able to accept design limitations if the units are initially designed so that they can be easily expanded or customized later. And those basements are probably the prime example in how we did that in phase one. This is a picture of our basement. We hired a guy to come in and finish it. I went in and built this cabinet and window seat arrangement. And then also, we installed this in this expanded window well, installed this, I keep pointing with my finger, I need to point with my pointer, this greenhouse in there. And it's just an example of, being able to customize after the fact to make the home your own. Unfinished back patios. Is another example. When we bought this home, it just had a rectangle defined by 2x6s with gravel. And that's how all the production home back patios came. And then we went through later, and I wish I would have taken this picture during the summer, because this is all green and lovely, but this is a back patio that, I ended up building. And again, it's an opportunity to customize and improve later based on whether you want to add some sweat equity or some money to make a nice back patio. And then et cetera. You know, this is just basically what we did in phase one for the most part. But as we go through the design process, you know, in phase two, we're going to be able to, you know, figure out, well, how do we want to create design flexibility? And it might not be these same choices that we make. And now I just want to show you some pictures of, you know, the insides of, again, some of the Model Ds, production homes. This is actually a Model E on the screen on the external, on the exterior, but you can kind of see, you know, what the look is here of these production homes, and they're gorgeous homes. Matt did just a fabulous job. All right, so this is the living rooms of Model Ds, and I just want to show you, you know, how much these homes, how different they can look, even though they're the same home. And it's funny when people come and visit, and they, you know, they'll come into my house and they'll come into my good friend Jeff Walker's house and they'll say, "Oh, you live in the same house as he does? It doesn't even, you know, look the same," because we've finished them differently after we've taken ownership. So again, people have gone through and done different things to, you know, make the space their own. This is the, you know, the kitchens in the various Model Ds. And the dining rooms. And then just in summary, you know, you know, we're going to limit the number of design choices. We're not going to have customization, and we will end up with, you know, better homes in terms of, we'll still have great quality, but there'll be a lot less work, and they'll be cheaper, and they'll be faster. And that's it. So back to Zoom, and we can take questions and then wrap it up.
Yep, it is 10:31 Hartwood local time, so if anyone needs to check it out. Looks like Sue and Steve have a question raising their hand.
I was interested when you said that Kelly had chosen a different method to build his home, because, and that kind of was interesting to know that they wouldn't necessarily all be clay and straw. But I wondered, I was just curious whether he used the SIPS panels. There was two really efficient buildings built near us recently, and they had big billboards talking about the efficiency of using those SIPS panels. And I was curious if that's what Kelly used, if you knew.
He did use, I mean, I think there's a lot of different kinds of SIPS panels. We've got some that we used in our common house as part of the ceiling structure or the roof structure. He called his a SIPS panel, although it was a different type of a panel than what we used in the common house. So he did use that. You know, here the way we achieved the efficiency of the wall insulation was we, instead of 2x4 walls, and when I say here, I mean in phase one, 2x4 is standard. And use more insulation. And instead of fiberglass insulation, we did blown in cellulose, which is better, better to do. And then we put an inch of foam on the outside of that in addition to the 2x6. So we have, I forget what the R value of our walls are, but somewhere 23 to 25, I think. And then we blew in a whole bunch of cellulose in the roofs, which again is more important than the walls.
But that hasn't been decided for phase two yet? That's still?
No, nothing. Yeah, I mean, we haven't decided any of that stuff for phase two. We'll investigate all the latest and greatest, you know, technologies and possibilities, and, you know, we'll decide what we want to do. I mean, I can say that one of the things we learned in phase one, we had this whole construction technologies team, and we investigated rammed earth blocks. We investigated pumicecrete and straw clay and straw bale. And then at some point we realized that, well, we were doing custom homes initially, was the plan to do all custom homes before. I mean, we were just so, you know, ignorant, but we'd never done this before. So, forgive us. But, we realized, we learned these lessons about, production homes are way cheaper than custom homes. So then we gave people that option. And then we realized that a lot of these technologies that we have been investigating don't work for production homes because there's nobody building straw bale homes in the area that can build 14 of them in 1 year. So what we need to do is figure out a sweet spot of what technologies can a builder, somebody that can build 14 homes in one season, what technologies can they work with that are pretty similar to what they already know. So putting in 2x6s versus 2x4s, they can work with that, no big deal. But if we ask them to do straw clay, no way. And one of the things that, we absolutely do not want to do in phase 2 is, hire a builder to use construction technologies that they've never used before. That we don't want to be the project that they're learning on. We did that with our pathways and used this road oil stuff, this experimental kind of stuff. And it worked pretty well in some applications in some places, and it was, pretty environmentally green and groovy and all that stuff. But the people that installed it here had never done it before, and it turned out pretty bad. And so we don't want to, we want to use technologies that traditional builders can feel comfortable with, but that we're still achieving our needs, being environmentally responsible, low cost, all that stuff.
So you haven't determined your builder yet?
No, we'll figure out hiring a builder down the road after, we get, I don't know when that happens exactly, but it'll be many months from now.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Great. Don and Tom?
Hi, we love everything that we've heard today. I love how well planned and well thought out and how much experience you all bring to this project. Looking at the very worst case scenario, if we would invest and something would happen to Matt or to Mac or to the people that are in charge of pulling this all together now, where would that leave us if the project's not complete?
Well, the worst thing is that you would not potentially have an opportunity to live at Heartwood. But the piece about your $12,000 is if I fail, if we fail to deliver a home, within a certain time frame, and I'm going to give myself plenty of time because of the inevitable delays. But if a number back. So I'm going to be under an obligation to deliver a home based on a certain price structure, which is going to be based on costs of what it costs to get those homes built. And if that doesn't happen, if that home is not available for you to buy by that deadline, then you'd get your money back.
Yeah, but I think we'd be more interested in a positive outcome, instead of, we're also,
That's it, we all are.
we're kind of, our time is more important to us now, even though we have some years.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't want anything to happen to Mac either.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, there's a certain planning is absolutely necessary, and there's a certain futility of planning, and COVID has really driven home that point.
Yeah, certainly.
All right. I don't have any other hand raises, physical, virtual, or chat. I do want to put on the record, I see Sasha and David. Let me just say two comments that were made. One from Mary Ellen and Paul. Their geothermal system for their single home residents, just for some perspective, was $15,500 in Denver before rebate and tax credit. So that's for folks to put in their back pockets. One other comment, I think maybe Marta can respond to this, but Scott had mentioned that perhaps a survey could let the entire group know what the approximate budgets are for all individuals, and that'd let people know if there are sufficient masses to ensure that there can be groups formed, and that's kind of a question in the survey, isn't it?
Not in mine. So I
Oh.
specifically didn't ask about the budget because it links very closely to the size of the house or the number of bedrooms that you want. And again, this was extremely preliminary thing that I was trying to do. I assume that we will be talking about the budgets and all of that in much more detail. So this, I'm sure we'll continue talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I can set up another survey in the future if needed. I just want to get this one done, and then we can, as we're progressing with discussions, we can add much more to what people want.
Great. Okay. Sasha and David?
Just a real quick question, and I might have missed it, but how can we get a hold of certain P2 members? Is there a way I can just communicate with anybody? Is that somewhere and I missed it?
Yeah, at the bottom of every phase 2 chat email is a link to that Google map that Charlie set up.
Yes.
And if you go to that map, which is only, we don't share that link with the whole world. It's just with the phase 2 associate members. You can click on anybody's name in that, and that'll have their email address and phone number.
Okay, I didn't notice that. Thanks, Mac. That's good to know.
Yep.
Okay, Becky?
Again, what I was thinking when I was talking about a neighborhood solar array was just to supply electricity, not necessarily the heat or the hot water or anything else, just to supply electricity, and also for cars, electric cars.
Yeah, all that can be done, and the scale of what you're trying to accomplish, you need to sort out as a community. My point was that you have an ability working as a group from the beginning to establish what that's about. And I'm glad you mentioned cars, because coming from an environmental background, my degree in it and all that kind of stuff, and looking at co-housing with all the best intentions, I will see groups beat themselves up with insulation choices or the manufacturing of some particular wallboard, and yet then they will go hop in their car and drive 30, 40 miles, whatever, to the grocery store on a regular basis and burn lots of carbon in the process. So that planning, especially at Heartwood, which is out of ways, planning a transportation infrastructure that has the lowest environmental impact, I think would be a real challenge and a real amazing goal that you might want to think about in terms of where you can make your impacts. If you started looking at that and said, hey, we all want hybrid cars, or we want a fleet of some such, and we want to create the electricity ourselves, and we're going to run the numbers, and because that can impact things like the site plan. We're dealing with that here at Harmony, where I planned for solar hot water and put pipes in all the buildings to all the roofs, and guess what? Solar hot water isn't the thing. Solar electric is, and hybrid cars are, and now we're trying to go back and retrofit. How do we charge all these things? So that kind of planning and goals up front can really impact reducing your footprint and making the site plan and the future work well for all of you.
Great. Anyone else with I just want to make sure everyone has the floor. Oh, Kelsey. I can unmute you.
I think I got it. Okay. Yeah, we were just curious. So everything is sounding wonderful. We're definitely interested in knowing more about the houses as we move along. Probably just as important to us is knowing what the development of the production houses, how that's going. We're also very interested in knowing more about the people and the culture of the community. So I was curious, in addition to having people's contact info and being able to reach out to people individually, what would be the best way for us to, would it be this meeting each month, or is there another way that we can get to know people and yeah, people at a cultural level, how people resonate with each other, what sort of values we all share, and so forth?
Yeah.
So, Mac, do you have something set up that way yet?
Well, that's a fabulous question. I mean, to get to know the other, I mean, to get to know the community and the culture of the community, the best way is to visit, you know, and I would expect that everybody will have visited the community before they need to make their full membership decision. I mean, it wouldn't be a requirement necessarily, and things are, you know, pretty challenging right now with COVID. But obviously, that's the best way to get to know the culture of the existing community. In terms of getting to know the other Phase 2 associate members, you know, we have this weekly gathering, or monthly gathering rather. You know, maybe if there was enough interest, we could put together like another gathering that was just strictly, you know, social. Maybe, you know, like a happy hour kind of deal. You know, grab a bottle of beer and turn on Zoom and chat or something. And maybe we have short term. I mean, we obviously have the Phase 2 chat set up as an opportunity to communicate with each other, and so ideas could be presented on that, possibly, of, hey, let's figure out a social time. Who's interested in that? If a bunch of people say I'm interested, you know, maybe it happens. You know, and I would definitely invite all of you to take initiative in different areas, like Marta did with that survey. You know, if you've got a need around getting to know people better, you know, bring that up on our email conversation and explore it and try to get your need met in that regard.
Mac, one other idea. I think you're in a great position, having lived there and put together your book of agreements and worked through a lot of kind of processes that you have, both social and also kind of community organization responsibility, that a lot of folks in this group may not be familiar with. So you might be able to pick those topics and, you know, and throw it into each meeting, whether it's like how you do your community meals, or how you do your work days, or what kind of you know, social functions get structured and how they work, or how you deal with kids. You know, there's a lot of those kind of basic issues of living together that you have sorted out, you have good systems for, but integrating new folks into how that works, what the problems may have been, and asking them for input and ideas. I think that's another great way to get people interacting and congealing as a community. And it also goes, let me just emphasize one point, you know, the essence of this is that you're going to be living together, and you want to have really good relationships. That's what co-housing is about. It's not about the buildings, it's about the relationships. And oftentimes in the design process, people get so focused on what's my doorknob, you know, what's the shape of my house, all that kind of stuff. They get distracted from the main reason that they're here. And I would strongly emphasize, in the way that you've said, yes, we're going to limit what we're doing as far as the buildings, but there's no limit to what you can do as a community in terms of interacting. So I would encourage anything you can set up to get that process rolling, so all of you people can get to know each other, really get excited about your new neighbors, because the essence is, when you move in, you want to know all these people. That's the joy of co-housing. When you move into your neighborhood, you've worked for months, if not years, to make this happen, and you have a real bond with those people because of that interaction. A lot of it's been challenging, but that makes moving into co-housing completely different than any other kind of experience. So setting up that track or finding, and I realize, Mac, your plate is full in many ways, but you might find other people in the group with a little bit of guidance from you and Sandy that can, and help from Charlie to organize some of those topics and parallel tracks. So on one hand, we've got professionals that are working on getting the houses done. On the other hand, you've got people that are really building that strong sense of community.
Yeah, I mean, that's super valuable. Thank you for contributing that, Matt. And that brings a couple of ideas to mind. One is that, you know, our website is immense, you know, so there's a lot of stuff there where you can, you know, explore pages on that website for, you know, many, many evenings and learn a lot about what our culture is about. And then you know, so I invite, you know, anybody to do that. And then the other piece is that, you know, what you brought up, Matt, this is a debate I've had with, you know, Chuck Durrett about, you know, I think that forming groups historically have spent too much energy on design workshops. You know, common house design workshops. And so, and I've argued that those workshops, more of that workshop time should be spent on learning to do consensus decision-making together, learning how to do, you know, compassionate communication together, just getting to know each other together, having fun together. And so we've identified that as a community, that the orientation and integration of phase 1 and phase 2 is a huge priority. And our membership team has been tasked with that responsibility. And we've got a fabulous membership team. Gail's on it, Sandy's on it, Sarah's on it. I'm not sure if there's anybody else on the call that's on it. I'm sorry if I missed anybody, but and so we are very aware that that's a huge priority, that we've got this established community and suddenly we're trying to grow it by 60%. And how do we do that as gracefully as possible? So it's a huge priority, and we'll and the membership team will, you know, do our best to make that all happen. Yeah, Gail.
So, you know, you mentioned the website, Mac, and for Kelsey and people who haven't been here yet, the website really does, I think, give an experience of our culture, especially if you go to the gallery and look at the pictures. I mean, pictures speak for themselves, and if you just run through those pictures, you will see what our culture is. I mean, how much fun we have, how we get together, all the things we do. And also, I want you to know that, you know, the phase 1 people are welcoming you into our community. And so you will be a part of us. You're not going to be over there in some field and we're over here in this field. You're going to be integrated into who we are. And so you want to get to know us as well as you get to know each other, because we're all going to be doing stuff together. And I highly recommend going to the website and looking at the pictures, because that, to me, is what speaks to the culture of who we are and where we want to go.
Great. I know David's arm is getting tired over there. What's going on with you?
So when new people join the P2 list and all, they generally produce a little bio sketch kind of and post it on the chat, I guess. But I think it would be interesting and helpful to have a place on the website where the P1 people would describe them, each of them would describe themselves or their family unit or whatever, and their interests and activities and whatnot. And then P2 people would do the same thing. And some of that might just be lifted from the pieces people have contributed, but some people probably haven't done that at all. And I mean, it's only, and also I think if it were indefinitely modifiable for each person. So when somebody posts something and talks about a certain set of interests they have, somebody reads it and says, oh, gee, you know, I don't know why I didn't put that in when I wrote my thing, and go back and edit it and add in. Those things could grow really, I think, very, I mean, you know, the people we've gotten to know in our visits are amazing people, wonderful people, but with lots of different interests. But there are some people we don't really know at all, even though we've been visiting 3 times. And it would be wonderful just to have a comprehensive repository of whatever each person or each family unit feels is a good idea to present about themselves, so other people could get to know them better. And that could be on the website. Probably.
That's great.
I volunteer to coordinate that. I think it's an excellent idea. We really need to have one place where we can find out all about each other.
Thank you, Becky. Yeah, I'll put it on the membership team agenda for this next week.
I really enjoyed the breakout rooms we had when there were just an intimate amount of people, like 3 or 4. I felt it was easier to get to know people a little better. I don't know how that could be incorporated like in a happy hour setting, but Charlie, you were doing, is Charlie still there?
Yes.
Yeah, there you are. And so you were doing a good job kind of moving us around. I like that. It was just a little easier to get to know everyone just a little better.
Oh, I can't take credit for that. That was the Zoom randomizer, and it would just plop you guys in different rooms.
Go ahead and take
Well, I
credit.
take that back, Charlie.
You're amazing, Charlie.
I guess you're not, Charlie.
All right. Any other questions? I want to respect the fact that we're about a half hour over already. All righty. Well, as is our tradition, let's move to a meeting critique. What went well with this meeting? What would have been done better differently?
Maybe if we had known the decision about production versus custom before the meeting, we would have had more questions about it. That was kind of sudden. So I'm sure after I hang up or we hang up, we may have more questions about that. Because that's kind of a major decision. So I guess if there's a major decision or something, it'd be nice to know ahead of time.
Right. And let me just take a minute. I don't want to, be defensive or anything, but let me just, take a moment to explain my thinking about it. Because I thought about announcing it ahead of time and whatnot, but I thought that, with the presentation I did, it might, answer a lot of the questions that people would have, versus, trying to field all those questions that were going to be answered in the presentation anyway. So that was just kind of some of the thinking. Whether that was a good thinking or not, that was my thinking. I just want to thank Charlie again for your help behind the scenes. He does all this on a voluntary basis. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I want to thank Matt for taking time. He's got a big crunch. He's about to head to Guatemala to visit his brother for a couple months. And thank you so much for spending your time with us this morning. And
You're welcome.
Thank everybody else that showed up. Any other meeting critique pieces?
I'll just add that it's really nice to see Matt and the experience you have with other co-housings. It just feels like this is coming together in such a well-grounded and just a really well put together way.
Thanks, Scott. No, great job, Mac.
Thank you. Thanks. All righty. Well, I think we're out of here then. So why doesn't everybody wave goodbye and we'll hit the end meeting button. See you, everybody.
Bye-bye.